In a city of light, the grandest shadows hide the most audacious lies. And in 1925, Paris, one shadow stretched higher than any other. This was the era of the année folle, the crazy years. A frantic, champagne-fueled dance on the fresh graves of a devastating world war. But beneath the glitter and jazz, the city was exhausted. Its monuments tired, its government overwhelmed and drowning in the cost of rebuilding a nation. And no monument was more tired than the Iron Lady herself, La Tour Eiffel, a gargantuan iron skeleton haunting the skyline of Paris. Remember, she was never meant to be permanent. A temporary spectacle for the 1889 World's Fair, scheduled for demolition just 20 years later. But she endured, first as a radio tower, then as a symbol. But by 1925, she was becoming an expensive, rusting embarrassment. Whispers filled the corridors of power and the columns of newspapers. What is to be done with the tower? The cost of maintenance was astronomical. This was the vulnerability, the crack in the facade of an entire nation, the belief that the government was desperate enough to consider the unthinkable. This simmering controversy was the perfect hunting ground, the perfect cover for a predator who dealt not in violence, but in perception. The target, the mark, was not a person. It was a shared anxiety, a collective doubt hanging in the Parisian air like fog. But every great deception needs a physical victim, someone to sign the check. In this case, a very specific, ambitious, and greedy group of men, the scrap metal dealers of Paris, a fraternity of self-made titans who had profited from the wreckage of the war, turning cannons into cars. They were shrewd, competitive, and always on the hunt for the next big score. Secrecy was their currency, and government contracts were their holy grail. To them, the city's landmarks weren't poetry. They were tonnage. Its history wasn't culture, it was weight, measured in francs per kilo. And the Eiffel Tower? That was the ultimate prize. 7,300 tons of prime Parisian iron, the biggest scrap deal in history, just waiting. The stage was set, the mark was primed. A city's burden was about to become a con man's opportunity, a masterpiece of misdirection. But to sell a national monument, you couldn't be a common criminal. You had to be more. You had to be an artist of deceit, and in the smoky cafes and grand hotels of Paris, just such an artist was reading the papers, sensing the music, and waiting for his grand performance. The man who read that newspaper article was a phantom of the aristocracy, a ghost who haunted the grand hotels and first-class cabins of the world. They called him Count Victor Lustig, a title as exquisitely crafted and utterly fake as the man himself. He was a symphony of deception. Born in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, his true nationality was fluency. He spoke at least 5 languages without a hint of an accent. His voice was his skeleton key, capable of unlocking the trust of a Parisian banker, a German industrialist, or an American millionaire with equal ease. His education wasn't in dusty libraries, but in the floating palaces that crossed the Atlantic. The great ocean liners were his university of human folly. He studied the rich like a biologist studying a rare species. Their vanities, their insecurities, and most importantly, their quiet, gnawing greed. Lustig never stole. He conducted transactions of confidence. He believed you couldn't swindle an honest man. You could only sell a greedy one a story. And the stories he sold were masterpieces. His favorite tool before Paris was a small, exquisitely crafted cedar box, which he called the Romanian money box. He would demonstrate it to a mark, showing how it could perfectly duplicate any banknote using radium in a secret chemical process. A perfect copy. The catch? The process was incredibly slow. It took 6 hours to print a single bill. He'd sell the box for a fortune, leaving the mark to wait. By the time the victim realized the box contained only a few preloaded bills and no magic at all, Lustig was an ocean away, a new count in a new city. And why did they never go to the police? Because their first question would be, "So you were trying to counterfeit money, monsieur?" This was his genius. He weaponized his victim's own larceny. He built his traps not with steel, but with the quiet corruption of the human heart. Now in Paris, this master craftsman was looking for a new canvas. The money box was clever, but it was chamber music. He was ready for a grand opera. And then he saw it in a small, overlooked article about the city's struggles with its rusting, expensive, and temporary iron tower. An idea so absurd, so monumentally arrogant, it was perfect. An idea that would require every ounce of his skill, charm, and sheer unmitigated nerve. He wasn't going to sell a magic box to one greedy man in a hotel room. He was going to sell the Eiffel Tower itself. A con of this magnitude couldn't be run from the shadows. It required the blinding light of officialdom. Lustig's first act was to become invisible by becoming a bureaucrat. He began by acquiring the most powerful weapon in Paris, authentic government stationery. The right paper, he knew, could be more persuasive than any truth. Then came the forger's art. A master craftsman was hired to perfectly replicate the official letterhead and the embossed seal of the Ministère de Poste et Télégraphe. This was the department that oversaw the tower's maintenance. A clever, believable choice. Not too powerful, but just powerful enough to be plausible. He invented his persona, Monsieur Lustig, Deputy Director General, a title with the perfect symphony of authority and crushing, soul-destroying boredom. Next, the stage. It had to be a place of unimpeachable prestige, a place where secrets were kept and empires were discussed. He chose the Hôtel de Crillon. From his new temporary office, he drafted the invitations, each one a masterpiece of formal, bureaucratic language, hinting at a confidential and lucrative opportunity. Due to serious structural issues and engineering complications, he wrote, the government is considering the dismantling and sale of the Eiffel Tower. The letters were not sent to just anyone. Lustig had done his research, selecting the top 5 scrap metal dealers in the city. He knew their names, their fortunes, and their rivalries. He wasn't just inviting them to a meeting, he was inviting them into an arena to bid against their greatest competitors. Each letter was sealed with a perfect wax replica of the ministry's crest and delivered by a uniformed courier, adding a final, theatrical flourish of authenticity. In 5 different offices across Paris, 5 of the city's richest, most cynical men opened their mail. First, confusion, then suspicion, and finally a jolt of pure, unadulterated greed. The sheer scale of the proposal was intoxicating. It bypassed their caution and went straight for the ego. Back at the Crillon, Lustig prepared his suite. It wasn't a hotel room anymore. It was a temporary outpost of the French government. He even hired a young con man, Dan Collins, to play the part of his eager, slightly nervous secretary. Every detail had to be perfect. The day of the meeting arrived. One by one, limousines pulled up to the hotel. 5 titans of industry, walking into the most elegant trap ever laid. Inside the suite, Monsieur Lustig, the drab bureaucrat, waited. He straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and arranged his face into a mask of weary importance. The 5 most powerful scrap dealers in Paris sat in a suite at the Crillon, the air thick with suspicion and expensive cologne. They were predators assembled to feast. Then the door opened. But it was not a slick salesman who entered. It was a stooped, careworn bureaucrat who looked as if he carried the weight of the entire republic on his shoulders. He began his speech not with a sales pitch, but with a complaint. He lamented the tower's staggering maintenance costs, the endless painting, the structural fatigue. Gentlemen, he sighed, the Eiffel Tower is being sold for scrap. The audacity of the statement hung in the air, sucking out all the oxygen. He quickly explained the secrecy. The public outcry would be unmanageable. This must be handled with the utmost discretion. He wasn't selling them iron, he was selling them a secret. The cynicism on their faces evaporated. The story was too big, too bold to be a lie. It was exactly the sort of desperate secret deal they imagined the government would make. To further the illusion, Lustig took them on a tour of the tower. Not in taxis, but in a rented limousine, a subtle, powerful symbol of state authority. As they walked the iron behemoth, Lustig didn't talk tonnage or price. He spoke of its history, its glory, and the sad duty he was performing. He was a patriot, not a salesman. The dealers were silent, utterly captivated. He had transformed a pile of scrap metal into a fallen national treasure, making owning it an act of historical importance. Back at the hotel, he announced the terms. Sealed bids to be submitted by the next day. Then he let them go, to let their ambition and paranoia do his work for him. But Lustig had been watching them all closely. He wasn't looking for the richest or the smartest. He was looking for the hungriest, the most desperate to prove himself. His name was André Poisson, a man on the fringes of the Parisian elite, whose ambition was far greater than his social standing. His wife especially pushed him relentlessly. As Lustig predicted, Poisson was the one who couldn't bear the uncertainty. He requested a second, private meeting. The fish had taken the bait. Now it was time to set the hook. In their private meeting, Lustig confessed his troubles. "A public servant's salary, monsieur. It is difficult to maintain a certain standard of living." It was the universal song of the corrupt official. Poisson's face flooded with relief. This he understood. He wasn't being swindled. He was participating in the time-honored tradition of the bribe. For him, Lustig's corruption made him real. A thick envelope of cash was passed discreetly across the table. It was not the main prize, but it was the psychological masterstroke, the seal of ownership. Assured of his success, Poisson submitted a winning bid. The next day, he handed over a banker's draft for $250,000. Lustig accepted the draft with the solemnity it deserved. He informed Poisson that the title deeds and scrap permits would be delivered in a few weeks. That very afternoon, Deputy Director General Lustig and his secretary took a taxi to the Gare de Lyon train station. They did not rush. They strolled. While André Poisson dreamt of demolition crews, Victor Lustig and his associate were in Vienna, living like kings. They read the Paris papers every morning, searching for headlines. But the headlines never came. In Paris, André Poisson waited. For 1 week, he was the proudest man in the city, the secret king of its skyline. After 2 weeks, the pride began to curdle. The promised documents had not arrived. The silence from the ministry was becoming awkward. "Government moves slowly," he told his wife and himself. "It's a delicate matter." He was a man building a dam of rationalizations against a rising tide of panic. By the 3rd week, the dam broke. The fear was too great to ignore. He walked to the telephone, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. A polite operator answered. Ministère de Poste et Télégraphe. Poisson cleared his throat. "Yes, I'd like to speak to Deputy Director General Lustig, please." There was a pause, the rustle of pages. Then the first hammer blow. "Lustig? I'm sorry, monsieur. We have no one of that name here." Panic. Pure, cold, adrenaline-fueled panic. He rushed to the ministry himself, demanding answers, his voice escalating with each denial. "The Eiffel Tower demolition," he pleaded. The clerk looked at him not with malice, but with pity, the look one gives to a madman. "Monsieur," the clerk said slowly, "the Eiffel Tower is not and has never been for sale." And with that, the floor gave way. In that instant, he felt it all. The loss of the money, the lie, the bribe. But all of it was dwarfed by one soul-crushing emotion: humiliation. He stumbled out of the ministry, a ghost in his own life. Any other man would have gone to the police, but André Poisson could not. To go to the police meant an investigation. It meant headlines. It meant all of Paris, his rivals, his wife, would know the story. And worse, he would have to admit to bribery, Lustig's final masterpiece. The bribe wasn't just to secure the deal, it was to purchase his victim's silence. And so, André Poisson went home and said nothing. The greatest con of the century was buried, becoming a private shame rather than a public crime. Lustig had counted on this. He knew that for a man like Poisson, the ego was more valuable than the wallet. Pride was the last thing a man would let go of. This perfect silent crime gave Lustig a sense of invincibility. It was, he felt, his signature masterpiece. An artwork so good he just had to do it again. Most artists, having created their Mona Lisa, would retire. But Victor Lustig was no ordinary artist. The silence of his perfect crime was, to him, a siren's call for an encore. He booked a suite at the same hotel. He printed the same stationery. He summoned a new cast of the 5 most ambitious scrap dealers he could find. The pitch was identical. The tour, the sealed bids, the air of weary officialdom. Lightning, he believed, could be caught in a bottle twice. But this time, one of the dealers had a shred of doubt that outweighed his greed. Before submitting his bid, he made a quiet visit to the Paris police. The police, now alerted, moved to spring the trap. But Lustig possessed a predator's sixth sense. He felt the change in the weather, the subtle shift in the hunt. Before the police could make their move, he was gone. He slipped out a side exit, hailed a cab, and melted back into the continent, leaving behind only an unpaid hotel bill and an immortal legend. He fled to America, the land of opportunity, and, for him, a fresh supply of marks. But his cons became less elegant. his confidence bleeding into recklessness. He even conned the most dangerous man in the country, Al Capone, out of $5,000. A move of such suicidal audacity that Capone, impressed, simply gave him the money back. But his final act lacked his signature genius. He masterminded a massive counterfeiting ring. It was lucrative, but it was a brute force crime, lacking the artistry of his earlier work. And this finally brought the full, unblinking attention of the US government. They weren't chasing a charming ghost anymore. They were hunting an economic scammer. After a manhunt that crossed the country, the law finally caught up with Count Victor Lustig. Not in a grand hotel, but on a street corner in Pittsburgh. His charm failed him in court. He was sentenced to 20 years in the most notorious prison on earth, Alcatraz. What a fallout for the man who sold perception. From the grandest suite at the Crillon to a 5-by-9-foot cell surrounded by cold water and colder stone. And André Poisson, he faded into obscurity, the quiet keeper of the world's greatest secret. His financial loss was immense, but his silence was absolute. Lustig died of pneumonia in prison in 1947. On his death certificate, under occupation, the clerk wrote, "Apprentice salesman." The fallout was complete. The artist was dead, his victim silent, his legend confined to the whispers of law enforcement. A cautionary tale of a genius who flew too high. But how? How did he make the impossible seem not just possible, but plausible? The secret wasn't the stationery or the story. It was something else entirely. It was a single, devastatingly simple psychological key. A tell not in his victims, but in human nature itself. And once you understand it, you see it everywhere. So we are left with the fundamental question, how? How do you sell something that isn't yours? Something that isn't even for sale? The easy answer is greed. But that's too simple. Greed is just the fuel. The genius of Victor Lustig was in the engine he built to consume it. His secret was not one of commission, but of omission. He understood a fundamental flaw in our thinking. We are experts at spotting small lies, but we are amateurs at questioning big ones. A lie of sufficient scale, of breathtaking audacity, doesn't get scrutinized. It gets its own category of possibility. This is the big lie. The sheer arrogance of the premise, selling the Eiffel Tower, acted as a shield. The victims' minds couldn't conceive of such a deception. But the big lie was only the first part of the tell. The second was even more insidious. He wasn't just telling them a story, he was inviting them into a secret. The human desire to be an insider, to possess knowledge others don't, is one of the most powerful forces on earth. It can override logic, caution, and common sense. This is why The Bribe was his true masterpiece. With that single transaction, Poisson stopped being a victim. In his own mind, he became a player, a co-conspirator. He was now financially and psychologically invested in the lie being true. He would reject any evidence to the contrary, because to accept it would be to accept his own foolishness. So that was the tell. The combination of a lie too big to question and an invitation to a secret too gratifying to refuse. Lustig didn't sell the Eiffel Tower. He sold André Poisson a more flattering version of André Poisson, a shrewd, important man moving in the secret corridors of power. This is his timeless lesson. The most dangerous con artists don't prey on our wallets. They prey on our egos. They sell us stories about ourselves that we wish were true. And that's why this isn't a story about 1925 Paris. It's a story about right now. The big lie is alive and well in our politics, our media, and our online lives. Victor Lustig was a criminal, a thief, a parasite, but he was also a mirror. He didn't create the flaws in human nature. He was simply a master at reflecting them back at us. His story fascinates us not because of how different he was, but because of how terrifyingly similar his victims were to ourselves. So ask yourself, if you had received that ornate, confidential letter, if you were offered a secret glimpse into the hidden machinery of the world, would you have slammed the door? Or would you, just for a moment, have invited the charming Monsieur Lustig inside to hear him out?